The dust has finally settled on bowl season, and after a horrid performance, it's time to ask the question, was the SEC overrated this year? The answer, clearly yes. In fact, over the last 2 seasons, the SEC has a worse bowl record than the Big Ten, the Big 12, and just barely a better bowl record than the ACC. The number one excuse you'll hear from the SEC is that they just don't care. And to me, that's an extremely weak claim, because if they don't care, then it means the rest of the sport cares way more than you when it matters at the end of the season. Everyone's faced with the exact same portal and NIL circumstances in the postseason. And so the fact that they're still flopping with all of that considered is extremely interesting. Another excuse you might hear is that they're just getting some bad bowl matchups. They're matching up against teams that finished higher in the standings in these other conferences than the SEC teams. That's true for a couple of bowl games. You see the SEC 9 had to play the ACC's second place finisher. They had to play the Big 12's fourth place finisher. But there were several direct comparisons that they lost. Their only win was their 5 against the Big 10's 5, but their 6 lost to the Big 10's 6. Their 8 lost to the Big 10's 8. Their 2 lost to the Big 10's 1. And if an SEC fan is truly desperate, they'll point to NFL draft numbers to say, look, we have more NFL guys getting drafted every year. And if you see, that gap has actually started to close recently. In fact, that 2024 number it's showing is actually even closer. This last year, it was 79 SEC to 71 Big Ten. So the gap is not as big as they'd like you to think it is. Some people like to point out the funny coincidence that the gap has started to close ever since everybody's been able to pay players. The SEC has been doing it for a long time. All of the coaches and players from that era are openly admitting to it. Yes, there were some top-tier teams in other conferences like USC and maybe Ohio State and Michigan paying their players, but now the whole conference is, and it's elevating them as a whole. It's the reason this gap is closed. It is not a coincidence. So you go back to the preseason AP poll where there are 10 SEC teams in the top 25. There's this implied supremacy that is there. It just doesn't exist like it used to. Now that the playing field has been leveled, the SEC's not cheating more than everyone else. Everyone's cheating just about the same because it's been legalized. Suddenly they look more human, and I find that to be more than just a coincidence.